Many believe that the American Civil War was fought over the institution of slavery, yet it was actually fought over a different controversial topic: the rights of the states of the United States versus the rights of the federal government in the states. The separation of powers between the federal government and the powers of the individual states and the people of these states in the United States is outlined in the 10th Amendment of the Bill of Rights. This amendment reinforced the idea of federalism in the United States. Federalism, in layman's terms, is a principle that the federal government is technically in charge of the states, but does not interfere with the states themselves, but rather their interactions. These interactions can include interstate trade and national defense.
The Tariff of 1828, better known as the Tariff of Abominations, sought to protect northern and western agricultural products from competition with foreign imports. However, the resulting tax on foreign goods would raise the cost of living in the South and would also cut the profits of New England's industrialists. Later that year, Vice President John C. Calhoun of South Carolina wrote the South Carolina Exposition of Protest, bringing the doctrine of nullification into the limelight of politics. This doctrine of nullification emphasized a state's right to reject federal laws within its borders and question the constitutionality of taxing imports without the explicit goal of raising revenue. South Carolina also nullified the Tariff of 1832, which replaced the Tariff of Abominations later, but reached a compromise with the federal government in the winter of 1833.
Another issue that was deemed as a right of the states at the time was the institution of slavery in the South. Many northern states outlawed slavery on a state level, yet the federal government had been leaving the argument to the states themselves instead of intervening. The abolitionist movement was started in retaliation of the practice of owning slaves and also their treatment. One of the most famous members of this movement was Frederick Douglass. The son of a slave woman and an unknown white man, Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey was born in February of 1818 in Maryland. Until the age of 8, Douglass lived and worked on a plantation where he saw firsthand the brutality of slavery. When he was 8, Douglass was sent to live with a shipwright in Baltimore. It was here that he learned to read and write. He spent around 7 years of his life in Baltimore before returning to the countryside. This is where he was sold to a farm run by a notoriously brutal slave breaker named Edward Covey. The treatment Douglass and other slaves received here was beyond brutal. They were whipped daily and barely fed. Douglass would later say that he was, quote, broken in body, soul, and spirit. In September of 1938, Douglass fled the farm and went up north to be free. Once up north, he constantly educated himself and became involved in the various abolitionist movements around him, such as the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society. He became a keynote speaker for the society and had a leading role in the abolitionist movement as a whole, even advising President Lincoln during the Civil War. Douglass went on to fight for the rights of African Americans and women after the Civil War until his death on February 20th, 1895. The issues involving federalism and the various rights of the states carries into today's society as well. The more common states' rights issues of today are the ownership and possession of firearms, Common Core curriculum, the legalization of marijuana, and recognition of same-sex marriage. Recently, the U.S. Supreme Court's June 26, 2013 decision in U.S. v. Windsor cleared the way for same-sex marriage couples to receive federal benefits. In this case, the Supreme Court struck down the section of the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, also known as DOMA, that limited marriage to union between a man and a woman. States' rights have and always will be a very complicated and highly debatable part of the United States. It is a never-ending tango between the federal and states governments.